All right, welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. When we take our medicine, we trust that what we're putting into our bodies is safe and effective, right?
Absolutely, that's a given.
But have you ever actually stopped to think about how drug companies ensure that quality in every single batch of medication that comes out of their factories?
It's a process most of us never see.
Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and take a deep dive into something called Process Analytical Technology, or PAT for short. And joining me to help us break this down is, well, an expert in the field. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
All right, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us the big picture? What exactly is PAT and why should our listeners care about it?
So, in a nutshell, P is all about monitoring and controlling the way drugs are made as the process is actually happening, in real time. It's like having a constant stream of information about what's going on inside those big manufacturing vats and reactors. And why should people care? Well, think about it. Would you rather have your medication checked for quality once at the very end of production or continuously throughout the entire process?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I'd prefer the continuous monitoring, for sure. Sounds like a much safer and more reliable way to do things.
Exactly. That's a big part of why PATI is so important. It helps ensure that the medicines we all rely on are consistently high quality, and it even has the potential to make the whole manufacturing process faster and more efficient.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm curious about the specifics. How does pay actually work? What kind of tools and techniques are we talking about here?
So Bicky uses a variety of really cool technologies. We're talking about things like spectroscopic probes.
Spectroscopic probes.
Yeah, these probes use light in a really ingenious way. They can actually analyze the chemical makeup of a substance without even having to take a sample out of the process.
Mm.
It's like shining a special kind of flashlight into a mixing tank and instantly getting a detailed fingerprint of what's inside.
Wow, that's incredible. So they can tell what's in there just by looking at the light?
Pretty much. Different chemicals interact with light in unique ways. So by analyzing how the light is absorbed or reflected, scientists can identify what's present in the mixture and even measure how much of each ingredient is there. It's like having a super-powered microscope built right into the production line.
Okay, so we've got these futuristic probes using light to analyze things. What else is there?
Well, in addition to those probes, we've got real-time sensors.
Okay, real-time sensors. Those sound pretty self-explanatory. What do they do?
Well, just like the name suggests, they constantly measure various factors throughout the manufacturing process. Things like temperature, pressure, pH, those kinds of things. They're like the vital signs of the process, giving a constant readout of how things are going.
So I'm picturing all of this data pouring in from these probes and sensors. It must be a ton of information. How do they even make sense of it all?
That's where the fun part comes in data analysis. We use something called multivariate data analysis.
Multivariate data analysis. Okay, that sounds pretty complex. Break that down for me.
Sure. It's basically a way of looking at all those different variables, from the probes, the sensors, all of it, and seeing how they relate to each other. You can find patterns and connections that you would never spot just looking at individual data points. It's like, baking a cake. You've got your ingredients, your oven temperature, baking time. But multivariate analysis helps you understand how all those factors interact to affect the final product, the texture, the flavor, everything.
Ah, okay, now I see. So it's not just about collecting the data, it's about understanding how it all fits together.
Precisely. And that's what makes patties so powerful.
Yeah.
It gives manufacturers a really deep understanding of their processes, which allows them to control things much more precisely and consistently.
And ultimately, that leads to better quality medicines for all of us, right?
Exactly. And that's not even all of it. PAT also opens up the possibility for something called continuous manufacturing, which is a whole other game changer.
Continuous manufacturing, haven't heard of that one. What's that about?
So traditionally, pharmaceuticals were made in batches, like separate steps. Imagine baking a cake where you mix all the dry ingredients in one bowl, then you do the wet ingredients in another, then you combine them, bake it, and then you start all over again for the next cake.
Okay, follow you.
Continuous manufacturing is more like having an assembly line for medication. The ingredients flow through the system in a continuous stream, constantly being monitored and adjusted along the way. It's like having a conveyor belt of cake batter that's constantly being mixed, baked, and packaged, all in one seamless process.
So it's all about making the process more streamlined and efficient.
Exactly. And PAT is a crucial part of making that continuous flow possible because you need that constant stream of data and analysis to ensure the quality is maintained throughout the entire process.
All right, so PAT sounds amazing in theory, but what about the real-world results? Are there actual examples of companies using PAT and seeing tangible benefits? Like, can they actually measure improvements in quality, speed, or maybe even how well they meet those strict regulations?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Now, I don't have specific case studies with hard numbers to share right now, but we can certainly connect the dots based on what we know about PAT.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So think about those batch failures we discussed earlier. If you can drastically reduce those failures by catching problems early on, you're obviously going to speed up production, right? Less time spent on rework, less wasted material, smoother sailing overall.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
And then there's the improved control that comes with pay. That tighter control over the manufacturing process should translate into more consistent quality from batch to batch, which means fewer deviations from those super strict specifications the regulators are always looking at. Smoother regulatory compliance can save companies tons of time, money, and headaches. So even without specific data points in front of us, it's pretty clear that pay has the potential to lead to some very real and measurable improvements across the board.
It definitely makes a lot of sense. And for our listeners who might be hungry for those real-world examples, I'd suggest doing a little digging online. I bet there are tons of case studies out there from companies that have implemented pay and seen some impressive results.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
So let's wrap things up here. Can you give us the key takeaways? Why is PATE such a game changer in the pharmaceutical world?
Sure. So PAID is all about using real-time monitoring and analysis to ensure the quality, consistency, and efficiency of drug manufacturing.
Hmm.
We're talking about spectroscopic probes, real-time sensors, and some pretty advanced data crunching techniques that give companies an unprecedented level of control over their processes. And ultimately, that translates into safer and more reliable medicines for all of us.
It's fascinating stuff, and I bet a lot of our listeners had no idea what went on behind the scenes to make sure their medications are up to par.
Right. It's not something most people think about.
Now, for a final thought to leave our listeners with, we've talked about how PATE is transforming the way traditional drugs are made. But the world of pharmaceuticals is constantly evolving, right? We've got all these new and incredibly complex therapies emerging, like biologics and nanomedicines. Those are some seriously cutting-edge treatments. How do you think PATE will need to adapt to keep up with these advancements?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something that researchers and engineers are grappling with right now. You see, the tools and techniques that work for those traditional smaller molecule drugs might not be as effective when you're dealing with, say, a large protein molecule or a nanoparticle. Those are much more complex beasts, and ensuring their quality and consistency during manufacturing requires some serious innovation on the PA front.
It definitely sounds like there are some exciting challenges and opportunities ahead for Pat in the world of these advanced therapies. It makes you wonder what new technologies and techniques will be developed to monitor and control those incredibly intricate manufacturing processes.
Absolutely. It's a rapidly evolving field, and it's going to be fascinating to see how PAT keeps pace with the incredible advancements happening in drug development.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks so much for taking us on this deep dive. I think our listeners learned a lot today.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about PAT.
For everyone listening, we encourage you to keep exploring this topic. There's a wealth of information out there about PAT and the amazing things it's doing for the pharmaceutical industry. And until next time, keep diving deep into the world of science and technology.
See you on the next one.